but secure that writes its own future.
That was Secretary of State Antony Blinken on a visit to Ukraine this week, showing his support for the nation as Russian forces are now threatening the major city of Kharkiv. Can recently approved U.S. aid to Ukraine get there in time to stop Russia's advances? ABC's James Longman has the latest from Ukraine.
Kharkiv is Ukraine's second largest city, and right now it feels like Russia's #1 target, under daily threat from bombardment. A strike on this neighborhood not far from the city center injured 5 people Saturday, among them 2 children. We've been in Kharkiv a few days now, and every day we hear missile and drone attacks coming in on the city. This hit just a few hours ago. We actually heard it hit. We've got investigators here on the site. The house ruined, and you can see the crater there in the garden. But to the north of the city, a battle is raging. A week into Russia's major incursion, at least 12 towns and villages now swallowed up by their advance. More than 8,000 have fled, among them 78-year-old Nina from Voloshansk, the epicenter of the fighting. What's happening here is Nina is desperate to go home. She keeps repeating it. She's crying. What perhaps Nina hasn't fully understood is that Voloshansk is not going to be a place she can maybe ever go back to. Ukraine now says they've stabilized the situation. I spoke exclusively with the battalion commander responsible for the defense. The aid shortage has made a difference, he says. We have a saying, the sweat of the artilleryman saves the blood of the infantryman. When there's only sweat and no shells, more of my men die. Ukraine's failures, the commander seems pleased at the chance to strike into Russia. For the first time in my life, he said, I can shoot into the territory of the Russian Federation. Speaking in China, Vladimir Putin said he wants to create a buffer zone to stop Ukrainian forces from being able to launch those attacks. Putin's visit to Beijing to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping, further cementing that strategic alliance that the West stands behind Ukraine. But touring a Kharkiv hospital last week, President Zelensky told me the stalled US aid package was held in back, and the 2 Patriot systems would be enough to protect Kharkiv.
If we're speaking about this region, Russia can't occupy this if, for example, 2 Patriots will stay in this region. Just 2 systems.
Americans are worried about how much money is being spent in Ukraine. What's your message to them?
All this money, we don't get any money. All this money, they goes to the factories in the United States, and then this factory gives jobs to Americans, and then weapons goes to us.
The only issue perhaps more critical than the weapons and ammunition shortage, Martha, is manpower. And that's why this week a new law came into effect here in Ukraine, which lowers the age men are drafted into the army from 27 to 25. Martha?
Our thanks to James. I'm joined now by Victoria Nuland, former Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs in the Biden administration. Good morning to you. These are the largest gains we've seen in Russia, as James just explained. President Zelensky directly blaming the delay of foreign aid. Can they turn this around?
I think they can certainly turn this around, Martha, but the 6-month delay certainly made a difference. The front line for Ukraine needs the artillery that we are sending. They need more air defenses. They need to be able to stop these Russian attacks that are coming from bases inside Russia. So I think there's also a question of whether we, the United States and our allies, ought to give more help in hitting Russian bases, which heretofore we've not been willing to do.
And do you think they should?
I think if the attacks are coming directly from over the line in Russia, that those bases ought to be fair game, whether they are where missiles are being launched from or where they are where troops are being supplied from. I think it's time for that because Russia has obviously escalated this war, including, as you said at the beginning, attacking Russia's second city, Kharkiv, which is not on the front lines, and trying to decimate it without ever having to put a boot on the ground. So I think it is time to give the Ukrainians more help hitting these bases inside Russia.
One of the reasons that the administration has hesitated is because they believe it will escalate things even further with Russia pull the U.S. further in. Why not? Why do you think that's a good idea?
Because it's Russia that has escalated this war. Russia has learned how to pull its forces back out of the range where we have allowed Ukraine to use our weapons and get our support. So they are getting a direct advantage in this war from our hesitation, and they have escalated massively. As you know, they have flattened a third of Kharkiv without ever having to get on the ground there. So it is time to stop that and help Ukraine push them back.
You have dealt with Vladimir Putin over multiple administrations. When you look at what's happened here and what he is doing, just tell us what you think he is up to, besides the obvious, and what mistakes we have made with Vladimir Putin.
Well, clearly at this point in his life, Vladimir Putin has decided that his legacy is based on restoring at least the Soviet Union, if not a larger empire for Russia. He is defining greatness for Russia in territorial terms rather than in economic or political power. And he's willing to sacrifice the future not only of Ukraine and his relationship with the rest of the world, but of the Russian people for this crazy imperial ambition. You know, I think the COVID period when he was in isolation just made him more and more paranoid, etc. If I had to look at one mistake we made, I think we underestimated what he was willing to do to get to this place that he wanted to get to for Russia, which is territorial and not political or economic.
Secretary Blinken's trip to Ukraine certainly sent a message that the U.S. is supporting him. But what would you say to those Republicans who are still concerned about aid going there, or those Americans who say, look, we have problems at home. Why do we need this aid?
Well, obviously we have problems at home, and we need to support our domestic front and our international front. But this is about more than Ukraine, and this is about more than Vladimir Putin. First of all, if Ukraine cannot survive and thrive, Putin will not stop there. He will walk towards NATO, and we will have a much larger war because he will know that he can, and we will become directly involved. But also, if you don't stop Putin here, a guy who has bitten off a piece of a smaller country that was not doing anything to hurt him, then it sends a message to autocrats everywhere that it's free game to invade your neighbor, etc. And that'll send a message in Asia, it'll send a message to Iran, all around the world. So if the United States wants to lead in this world, if we want to maintain the free and open democratic order that has served us so well, we've got to protect it abroad so that we can stay safe at home. And to remind, the vast majority of this aid for Ukraine is coming right back to U.S. defense industry to build those weapons for us to replace the ones we're sending to Ukraine. And it provides good jobs in more than 30 states of the United States.
And NATO is now considering sending trainers to Ukraine, but the U.S. has said no to that. Is that the right move?
You know, we do a huge amount of training for Ukrainians in NATO territory, in Poland and Germany and other parts of the alliance. It is hard for Ukrainians to come out and come off the front to train. But I worry that NATO training bases inside Ukraine will become a target for Vladimir Putin. And it does directly implicate NATO on the ground, which could, as you worried about earlier, escalate the war in a different direction and cause Putin to think that NATO territory might be fair game for him. So I think it still makes most sense to do most of the training outside of Ukraine, but to give advice inside Ukraine as the Ukrainians ask for it and need it.
Okay, thanks so much for joining us this morning. It's great to see you, Secretary. Coming up, the Powerhouse Roundtable takes on the Trump trial and the latest in the 2024 race. We'll be right back.
World markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg 1130. Now, a global news update.
President Biden says he supports peaceful, nonviolent protest. He spoke to graduates at Morehouse College Sunday morning, speaking on the Israel-Hamas war and the recent protests that have embroiled college campuses. The president expressed sympathy for those caught in the conflict and again called for a ceasefire. Some students were seen sitting with their backs turned in silent protest as the president delivered the commencement speech at the historically black university. Sean Diddy Combs is apologizing after a video released Friday appeared to show him assaulting his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, in 2016.
I'm so sorry. But I'm committed to be a better man each and every day.
In a video posted on Instagram Sunday, the rapper and businessman said his behavior on the video is inexcusable. He added he takes full responsibility for his actions. The LADA says no charges will take place because of the statute of limitations expiring. I'm Michael Kastner.
And I'm Denise Pellegrini in the Bloomberg Newsroom, and we are monitoring the situation in Iran closely. A helicopter carrying Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi in an emergency landing situation. That is according to Iranian state television, which says this emergency landing took place in a forested area. Raisi had been traveling in Iran's East Azerbaijan province. He'd been in Azerbaijan earlier to inaugurate a dam with Azerbaijan's president. Iran flies a variety of helicopters in the country, but international sanctions make it difficult to obtain parts for them. Its military air fleet also largely dates back before the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Other big story we're monitoring for you, Jeff Bezos, Blue Origin resuming space tourism flights, sending 6 private passengers to the edge of space and back from its West Texas launch site.
Command engine start. 2, 1, 0. Ignition. And lift off.
And the crew includes Ed Dwight, former Air Force captain. He was selected as the first black astronaut candidate in 1961, but never got a chance to fly in space with NASA. Well, he's flying today. And billionaire Jeff Bezos, Blue Origin, had halted crewed operations, you may recall, following that 2022 flight mishap with an engine failure mid-flight. That was on a flight without crew members. And Blue Origin, also building massive orbital class of rocket, aims to send humans to the moon later this decade, and is seen as a future key strategic rival to Elon Musk's SpaceX. Boeing's first crewed space flight using its Starliner craft has been delayed for a 3rd time this month. We get more on that from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
It's because of repairs on a helium leak on the vehicle. Boeing and NASA now plan to launch from Florida no earlier than 3:09 p.m. local time on May 25th. The announcement is the latest in a long series of delays and setbacks for the program. Flight engineers first spotted the helium leak during preparations for a launch attempt originally scheduled for May 6th. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Denise Pellegrini, and this is Bloomberg.
Now, a sports update on Bloomberg 1130.
They're playing the final round of the PGA Championship. Colin Morikawa and Xander Schauffele share the lead at 15 under. At the stadium, the Yankees will go for the 3-game sweep of the White Sox. In Miami, the Mets look to salvage the final game of their set with the Marlins. Over to the NBA, the Knicks battle the Pacers in Game 7 at the Garden. The winner will play the Celtics. The Nuggets and Timberwolves meet in Game 7 in Denver. That's the Bloomberg Sports Update. I'm Joel Sir.
Sunday's news shapes Monday's world. ABC's This Week on Bloomberg 1130.
I think this trial is absolutely ridiculous. I think it's a sham prosecution. And I think that luckily the president's supporters should know that he's actually in great spirits despite the circumstances of this. The American people have already acquitted Donald Trump. The sooner that this scam trial can be concluded, the sooner that the president can get back to getting out, campaigning, and talking to the American people about the issues that matter to them.
Top Trump supporters and VP hopefuls J.D. Vance and Doug Burgum joining the parade of GOP supporters at the Trump trial this week. Let's bring in the Powerhouse Roundtable, former DNC chair Donna Brazil, former Trump Justice Department spokesperson and Dispatch senior editor Sarah Isger, NPR White House correspondent Asma Khalid, and the New York Times David Sanger, author New Cold Wars. I don't want to get your book title wrong, but I do want to start with you. So we went from not knowing if there would be any debate to 2 debates, but this is really upending tradition.
It is upending tradition. First, ending the role of the commission on presidential debates. Second, having the candidates work it out between themselves. I think the
big question is this going to be a contained debate like the better ones that you just showed at the beginning of the show? And in the ideal, we're back to the Nixon-Kennedy era where there was actual real discussion of, speaking of new Cold Wars, the old Cold War and strategic advantage for the United States versus its adversaries and real domestic issues. The debates have been straight downhill with occasional bumps ever since. And it's going to be a real challenge to keep these on. But when you think about it, if these debates go well, the moderators will force a discussion of how each candidate views democracy, how they view the importance of, say, climate change. I think we already know that from the different policies. And mostly, I think if we get a view of what the role of the United States is in the world, something that, believe it or not, has not been debated or discussed by these candidates once in the midst of the divisions we've seen.
And Asma, the Biden campaign is holding firm that the president will only debate twice. Donald Trump is already offering more debates with Telemundo, vice presidential debate with HBCU.
That's right. And, I think what Donald Trump is trying to do is goad Biden into participating in additional debates, specifically because, they say, and this is true, that Biden does have some weaknesses when you look at certain minority communities. The challenge is, Joe Biden and his campaign has made it very clear that the debate about debates is over. They want to keep this very limited. They don't want to have a live audience for folks to cheer or jeer. And they also really want these debates to occur before early voting begins. And we know that early voting is going to begin as early as September in many states.
And Sarah, what do you think about the conditions of the debate? Who does that help? Who does that hurt? I mean, cutting off a mic is not what Donald Trump likes.
I think, believe it or not, this actually probably helps Donald Trump. He may not like his mic cut off, but to force him into a more disciplined debate environment will probably help him because it will empower the moderators. It'll make it a watchable debate. Part of what happened in 2020